Elections in Israel are based on nationwide proportional representation. The electoral threshold is currently set at 3.25%. With the number of seats a party receives in the Knesset being proportional to the number of votes it receives. The Knesset is elected for a 4-year term. Although most governments have not served a full term and early elections are a frequent occurrence. Israel has a multi-party system based on coalition governments, as no party has ever won a majority of seats in a national election, although the alignment briefly held a majority following its formation by an alliance of several different parties prior to the 1969 elections. The legal voting age for Israeli citizens is 18. Elections are overseen by the Central Elections Committee and are held according to the Knesset elections law. Under normal circumstances, Israel's basic law requires national elections for the Knesset to take place on a Tuesday in the Jewish month of Cheshvan 4 years following the previous elections. However, it is possible, and it often happens, that early elections can take place prior to the date set in the basic law. Early elections can be called by a vote of the majority of Knesset members, or by an edict of the president, and normally occur on occasions of political stalemate and of the inability of the government to get the parliament's support for its policies. Failure to get the annual budget bill approved by the Knesset by March 31 also leads automatically to early elections. It is also possible to postpone the date of the election by a special majority of the Knesset members. Israel uses the closed list method of party list proportional representation. Thus citizens vote for their preferred party and not for any individual candidates. The 120 seats in the Knesset are then assigned proportionally to each party that received votes, provided that the party gained votes which met or exceeded the electoral threshold. Parties are permitted to form electoral alliances so as to gain enough collective votes to meet the threshold and thus be allocated seats. The low threshold makes the Israeli electoral system more favorable to minor parties than systems used in most other countries. Two parties can make an agreement so that both parties' sum of surplus votes are combined. And if the combined surplus votes amount to an extra seat, the extra seat goes to the party with the greater number of surplus votes. Voting begins 12 days before election day for the general public in Israeli diplomatic missions worldwide, for Israelis serving abroad in an official capacity and their families, and for Israeli sailors on Israeli ships at sea. Polling stations for serving soldiers open 72 hours before election day and soldiers may cast their votes from then up to the end of the election. Election day is a legally mandated national holiday. Most public polling stations are open between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. Though if voters are still in line at 10 p.m., the station will remain open until everyone has voted. Polling stations in small communities with fewer than 350 residents, hospitals, and prisons are open between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Patients and staff in hospitals not able to vote during election hours are entitled to special permits allowing them to vote after polling stations in hospitals are closed to everyone else. Every resident eligible to vote is assigned to a particular polling station close to their registered address, which maintains a list of all voters eligible to vote at that station. At the polling station, officials check the identification of voters to ensure that they are assigned to that particular station, check off their names in the list of voters for that station, and hand the voter an envelope. The voter selects the ballot slip of his or her party of choice behind a divider, places the slip into the envelope, then emerges from behind the partition to place it in the ballot box. Special polling stations are set up in hospitals, prisons, diplomatic missions abroad, military bases, women's shelters, and Israeli ships to enable medical professionals, patients, diplomats and their families, Jewish agency staff abroad, soldiers, prison inmates and staff, sailors, and residents of women's shelters to vote. Polling stations with accessibility for the handicapped are set up around the country and police officers on duty may vote at any polling station. However, to ensure that nobody votes twice, as they are still assigned to a particular polling station close to their registered place of residence, They must vote with what are referred to as double envelopes. The envelope containing their ballot slip is placed into a larger envelope which also contains their identifying information so that it can be checked against the list of voters at their assigned polling station to see if they were marked as having voted there before their double envelope vote is counted. Aside from double envelope voters, all citizens